Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Michael Anthony. Michael Unbroken is the founder of Think Unbroken, an international award-winning speaker, best-selling author, and world-renowned trauma coach. As an influencer in the mental health space, Michael challenges and inspires people to overcome the self-doubt caused by childhood trauma, to break free, heal, and become the hero of their own story. Michael has personally worked with thousands of individuals to help them create lasting transformations, destroy mental roadblocks, and build the wealth, health, and relationships of their dreams. Michael has taught his Unbroken Transformation tools to a wide variety of clients, from CEO and Fortune 100 executives to normal everyday people. For almost a decade, Michael has been a figurehead and thought leader in the mental health space, coaching and educating millions from stage. Michael has been featured on Apple TV's Office Hours, Jubilee's Circle of Secrets, and Grant Cardone's 10X Bootcamp. Michael has also been featured on hundreds of podcasts, including this one today, including Entrepreneurs on Fire, Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess, The Mental Illness Happy Hour, and The Mark Devine Show. From homeless to hero, Michael Unbroken found his way back from stuck, hurt, and broken to being the hero of his own story. Michael is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Think Unbroken, and also hosts the #1 award-winning Think Unbroken podcast, which has been downloaded over 4 million times in 125 countries. Michael teaches at Think Unbroken Academy and is on a mission to end generational trauma in his lifetime through education and information. Thank you so much for being here today, Michael.
Yeah, for sure. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, what an impressive bio you have there. How did you get to this place? I always like to kind of start with backstory. How did you get to where you are now with all of that?
Great question. And here's the reality. I never planned on any of this, right? I didn't plan on becoming this speaker and coach and writing books and the podcast and traveling the world and talking about this. I had just been working on my own shit. And I come from really kind of one of the worst backgrounds you can imagine. And I always tell people this up front is like, don't compare your story and your journey to mine. I'll give you the truncated version just for the sake of time. But basically, I grew up in the Midwest in the 80s. My mom was a drug addict and alcoholic. She actually cut off my right index finger. My stepdad that she married was, this guy 6'4", 250 pounds, beating up a 7-year-old, put me in the hospital multiple times. We spent most of our childhood like deeply impoverished. I mean, I lived with 30 different families between 8 to 12 years old, getting bounced around place to place to place. Mom always in and out of rehab. No idea where my stepdad was, never met my real father. And when I was 12, my grandmother adopted me, which in some sense is a godsend, right? And the reality is, though, I'm biracial, black and white, and she's an old racist white lady from a town in Tennessee you never heard of. I mean, we had a copy of Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf, in our kitchen table. My uncle's a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. It was fucking just chaos. And like any 12-year-old in a situation like that, I started getting high. I started doing drugs, popping pills, anything I get my hands on, drinking, and getting drunk every day by the time I was 13. I got kicked out of high school multiple times. In fact, didn't even graduate. They just gave me the diploma and they're like, get out. And when I was 18, I was trying to find out how to like navigate the world. And I had gotten fired from a warehouse job where I was just putting microchips into motherboards all day long, like a fucking monkey on an assembly line. And I got fired from that job too. And I'm sitting here one night in my car, 18 years old, like not really understanding reality or life and just trying to make it through. My mom had disappeared to Florida. My grandmother was in a coma. I was taking care of my 17-year-old brother, which, I mean, two boys, 18, 17, all we were doing was fighting each other, like put holes in walls and shit. And as I was sitting in that car, I was like, okay, there's a solution in here somewhere for all of this chaos in my life. And I decided that it must be money. And so I made a declaration, by the time I'm 21, I want to make $100,000 a year legally. And the legal part was important. I have family in prison for life. My 3 childhood best friends have been murdered. And I've been in handcuffs more times than I can count. So I like knew the path. I was like, it's either do this or die, basically. And I just started learning skills. Skills have utility. I ended up being a fast food general manager with 52 people under me at 18 and a half years old, making like 30 grand, which is like $1 million when you're 18.
Right.
And then from there, I landed a job with a Fortune 10 company. And I make my first 100 grand the year I turned 21. I reached my goal. And the reality of that is that my life just became exponentially worse because I had access to do whatever I wanted. And so, fast forward about 5 years, here I am, 350 pounds, smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, cheating on my girlfriend. I'm fucking $50,000 in debt, making 200 grand a year. My little brother stops talking to me, and my fucking car got repoed. Like all that happened in the course of 5 years. And I was sitting in my bed one Saturday morning, eating chocolate cake, being fat as shit, watching the CrossFit games. And I was like, what are you doing with your life, man? And I picked myself up out of the bed and I went in the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. And I'll be honest with you, I just went to complete war with myself. The things that transpired in that mirror and in that moment were not nice. They were not kind. They were not this coddling bullshit that we're told is what we should do when life is hard. It was take a hard look at your shit. And I asked myself this question in that moment, and I don't know where this question came from, but it was like, what are you willing to do to have the life that you want to have? And the answer was no excuses, just results. And for almost 15 years, that has been what has driven me. And so you asked me how I got to where I am, and that's how. It took that massive, unbelievably chaotic space of years combined with eventually just being tired of my own bullshit to create the willingness and drive in me to do something different. And it's not like anyone in my life was like, hey, dude, you should do something about your life. In fact, almost most of it was encouraged. Right. And then, you go look at your friends and I'll show you your life kind of situation. And from 25 to 30, my God, those years were fucking hard. They were so hard because when you bring awareness to your life, then you got to deal with your shit.
Yep. Yeah, so true. What you mentioned about being around the wrong people, I forget whose quote it was, that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So if you're spending time with people who are causing trouble, that's what you're going to do too. If you're spending time with people who want to make changes in their life, that's also what you're going to do. So it's choosing which of those 5 people you're going to hang out with.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I think it's also about paying attention because, like, look, you can take a measure of it. When I was 25, making a couple 100 grand a year, partying, doing all the drugs, hooking up with all the chicks, what do you think my friends were doing? My friends were all overweight, eating like garbage, smoking cigarettes, getting drunk every night. Look, it wasn't uncommon because we were making a shit ton of money and we were kids for us to like get a limo, get a bunch of drugs, go to the best club in town, party all night, and go to work the next morning. Right. And now as I approach 40, I'm like, I can't imagine doing that. I fucking have too strong of a cup of coffee and I'm up for 2 days. Right. And when I look at my friends now, like, and it's important because people play a role in your life. And the men, speaking just from the context of this, I look at the men who are in my life at that point, and it's not that I don't have love for them and not that they weren't great men, but they weren't the men that I needed in my life.
Mhm.
Right. And that's kind of the conversation you have to have too, is like people are in your life for a season and you have to be willing to let them go. Because if you don't, then you're never going to find out who you're really supposed to be in connection with. And that's a difficult thing, right? Especially if you're like, I grew up in the Midwest and you have small town mentality and nobody ever leaves. I'm one of the only people I know who left this place I grew up. Right. And so it's like that's kind of the game that you're playing. It's like, do you want to become you? Well, you can't become you if people are always pulling you back.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah, living in the Midwest myself, there is that mentality, isn't it? We kind of always
Hmm.
joke that when you once you leave, you always come back. But if you don't, you almost do a little bit better if you can stay away from that the where you grew up sometimes is not always the greatest thing to be in. So yeah. How did you, I mean, you didn't know where that question came from to what do you want to do with your life, but how do you get past all of those traumas. And I guess maybe we should start with what is trauma, because we all have different definitions of trauma, right? What is the definition that you use when you're working with people and just getting yourself out of things?
Yeah, I mean, it's not people think of it being these big experiences, which it is, right?
Mhm.
Molestation and divorce and physical abuse and neglect and homelessness and poverty and all the things that I talked about, right? Many of the experiences I had myself, those in their right are traumatic experiences, right? But so are little things. And I think people need to take heed of that. But the reality is that, and I've talked to some of the leading experts in the world about this: Dr. Caroline Leaf, Dr. Gabor Mate, Judd Brewer, Pete Walker. I mean, fuck, the list goes on. I've talked to all of these people, all of them, right? And because I've always been trying to like prove a hypothesis, and that hypothesis in the beginning was like, okay, trauma isn't the pain, it isn't the physical experience, it's the emotional byproduct that carries with you this residual impact that creates this really negative effect in your life, right? And trauma ultimately, it's the theft of identity, because the thing that happened to people, and this happened to me too, and I didn't know, right, until you, because you don't know until you know, but I didn't realize I was playing a fucking victim the whole time till I was 25 years old, and I really cut this line in the sand. I was a victim. I was everything everyone told me to be. I was fucking codependent. I didn't take care of myself. I had no values. I had no moral character. I didn't live in integrity. There was nothing about my life that was admirable. Now, on paper, you would look at that and you'd go, man, he had a car and a super hot girlfriend and lives in the best place in the city and makes all this money. But it was bullshit. It was all bullshit, right? And so what I had come to realize is like the trauma was the experience that I was so tied to about my self-worth, about who it is that I was in the world, about what I had the capability of being and becoming, and the lack thereof. And so when I really think about it, like I look down at this hand and I'm missing half this finger and it's discolored and multiple skin grafts and on and on and on. And I was a victim to that, rightfully so. And by the way, I don't take people's victimhood. I'm never going to do that. Like fucking bad shit happens. Yo, I get it.
Mhm.
But it's like, okay, cool. What are you going to do with it? And the thing about trauma is that it ties you into a moment in an experience. Now, as a coach, and I think this is really important to differentiate, one of the things I'm really great at, and this is one of the things that's made me such a good coach, is that I can help show you what you're missing, and then you get to take that into therapy and go and do that deep emotional work, because a lot of times therapists miss that. They miss the thing. I was just coaching a client the other night and he was having this really intense experience about shame and guilt over a chair, and I was like, bro, it's never the chair.
Mhm.
Like whatever the thing is that you think, but that's what trauma does to you, right? It makes these moments and experiences so much bigger than they actually are. And it's not until you really sit in it and you look at it. Part of it is objective, like understanding and noticing, like really looking at it and standing inside what this experience is. And then part of it is recognizing that from the youngest age, we're being programmed, we're being indoctrinated, we're being emotionally enmeshed and groomed into the person that we're becoming. And if trauma is like the precursor for all of those things that have happened, that's how you're going to navigate the world. And so people think that it's like the experience, which in part it is, but it's more so the byproduct that really negatively impacts people, because you'll see people who, like me, have had some kind of neglect or abuse or whatever, and then they go on to be very successful in one area of their life, right? And then they sabotage all of the rest. And life is this really interesting. I think life is just a triad. There's three areas, and I think you can pile everything about the human experience into them. It's health, wealth, and relationships. That's it. That's life. You Venn diagram them. Everything under planet Earth falls under that experience. And you'll find people who have had trauma in their life go and excel generally in one area, and then the rest is garbage, right? Or worse, none of the above. And their whole life is a fucking disaster. And a lot of that happens as a byproduct about the self belief of what they believe they're capable of having and deserving on the after on the backside of traumatic experiences. Because if and this is a dark thing to say, but this is true. If you are molested or raped, you may have this ideation that you are not worthy of love. And so the only thing that you offer to people is your body and not your heart. And you're like, why do I keep getting in these relationships? And it's like, well, we might need to take a really deep intrinsic look at what's happening and why you've tied your self-worth to orgasms or lack thereof, right? And so it's like, I mean, I can go on to this for hours, but the baseline of it is really understanding it's not always the experience itself, but it's more so the theft of identity that leads down this path of you having to create a new story.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think that's a big definition to make there, because I think a lot of people don't realize what effect the trauma has on them. And I've talked to multiple people who've gone years and they think, oh no, it didn't affect me, but you can see where those things do affect that person. Uh, how do we get past that point and help them understand what their trauma has, or what that experience has done to them?
Yeah, well, it's about understanding. You
Yeah.
just said it, right? I mean, I you know more about me in 8 minutes than people who knew me for 30 years, right? The closest people, my girlfriend who lived with me for 7 years had no idea anything that happened to me in my past. Nothing. Right. And that's the majority of people who have those traumatic experiences, because we carry shame and guilt and fear of judgment and all the things that come along with it. And so it's like, if you really want to step through this, it begins with acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement is really about being honest. And the hard part about honesty is that it's gonna suck.
Mhm.
It's gonna fucking suck. It just is. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you. I wish people could just like step into a moment of therapy or to coaching and just one time be like, this happened to me and life is better, but it's not, I've never seen that happen. And there's something really true about this idea about the truth will set you free. And I vividly remember having these experiences early on in my journey of telling the truth for the first time, mind you. Because you have to understand, one of the things that happens to people who've been through very traumatic experiences as well is that one of the coping mechanisms, sometimes forced by proxy of the environment you're in, is to become a liar. And I would say that I'm a Hall of Fame Mount Rushmore liar. Like, I'm fucking incredible at it because I was taught it. You were not allowed to ever, when the cops came, if you told them the truth, you would suffer consequences I'm not even going to talk about publicly. Right. When the teacher asked you why you're covered in bruises, it was never honesty. Right. When all these things, all this shit you think that you know about this experience and the way people react to it is tied into salvation and self-preservation. And if that's predicated on dishonesty, that becomes your nomenclature for navigating the world. And so you only lie all the fuck, we all know when people are lying. Like, we all have an indicate, most of us, I'll rephrase that. Most people know when people are lying, right? And so you look at it and you think to yourself, well, why is this person lying? And it, generally speaking, has nothing to do with the experience that's taking place and everything to do with what happened 35 years ago.
Yeah.
And so when you step into telling the truth, which, by the way, if someone would have told me what I was about to experience, I don't know if I'd have done it,
Mm.
because cleaning up your own fucking messes, oh my God, that sucked. Holy shit, that sucked. 4+ years of just cleaning up decades of shit that I had caused with my family, with intimate partners, with my best friends, in business, with myself. And in that, one of the things that was really powerful, though, again, speaking to like, where do you really start, is that I made a declaration that one of my moral values moving forward in my life was to be honest. And I'm honest in a capacity in which I've actually had to learn how to be honest in kind ways and effective ways, because it went from never telling the truth to being fucking brutal, which is like a really intense pendulum swing. In fact, so much so throughout the course of probably the last 15 years, I've had multiple people be like, you need to work on your delivery. And so a big part of it, which also makes me a really effective coach, by the way, here's what I will say about it in addition to all of that. When you start telling the truth, you will notice how the universe starts supporting the life that you want to have.
Mhm.
And the truth is something that when you share it in a capacity, and look, there's different capacities about this. Like, I am not a proponent of telling your best friends and your lover and your cousin about the darkest shit that has happened to you. Go to therapy, get a coach, get a journal. Your this is a fucked up thing to say, but your community is not your emotional support dog, right? And so, I mean, probably neither is your emotional support dog. They want to hear that either. Go to a therapist, right? And so that's the thing, that when you step into just this brutal amount of honesty with both yourself and the people in your life, you'll start to feel a sense of freedom. And on that path, like, ultimately, what is healing, right? People always ask me, like, well, how do you know if you've healed trauma? Well, I think it's a journey of a lifetime, because, TD Jakes says this. It may not be his, but he's the person I always quote: new levels, new devils. And even this holds true for me. The deeper I get into this work, the harder that the work becomes for myself personally. But what's so fascinating about the truth and standing in this honesty is that for the first time, you'll become you. And the way that I define being healed or healing is doing what you want because you want to do it, and not doing what you don't want because you don't want to do it, and by becoming you. And the more work that you do to become you, the more free you will be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you, are most of the people that you work with as a coach, are they mostly men, or do you work with females as well?
No, it's pretty split.
Okay. Do you see a difference in that ability to come to their truth in the men versus the women?
No, because people who come to me are ready.
Okay.
When somebody has come to the moment in which they are deciding to work with me, whether it's in our group coaching programs or one-on-one, the thing that they have decided is that they need help. And they've raised their hand and, like, help me. And so, generally speaking, on the rare occasion, I'll have to fire somebody because they're actually not ready or they're not doing the work. But
Sure.
for the most part, the people who come in, male or female or whatever, it doesn't matter. They're just like, man, I got to do something here, right? And that's how I know they're ready, because until that moment, you're not ready.
Yeah.
Right. And that got to do something can be very different, because it could be about the impact in your relationships, could be an impact about your health and your habits, could be the impact about your career and your value in the workplace or in the world. There's so many different reasons why somebody might come in, but ultimately the goal is always the same. I want them out. Like, I want you out of my program. Like, I want you into the world doing your thing. And unlike a lot of modalities and people in the industry of helping, like, I don't want you in my program for 7 years. Because if you're still coming to me in 7 years, this shit ain't working.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So, but I digress. The biggest thing for people that I see who ultimately are going to step into a program with me, who are going to have the most success, are those who are ready. And ready sometimes, unfortunately, is you just fucking destroyed your life again, right? And ready also sometimes is things are great, but you've plateaued and you can't get to the next level. Those are the people who exceed, right? Like, I love working with those people, because then we go into the nuance of it, because there's a level of understanding involved as well, in the capacity to help. Because if someone's never done the work with a coach in any kind of depth, like, we have to baby step and walk a very slow pace into transformation. But if you've already been a little bit of personal development, maybe you've been in therapy a couple of years, you tried to coach before, I can hit it a lot harder with you. So, it's so subjective. It really just depends person to person.
Sure. Sure. Are there any like little things, one or two things that you would say from people after listening to this interview that they can just start to work on themselves, even if they're not quite ready to get to a coach step? What can they do now to just start the process?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one is, I think, very simple. We just talked about it in depth. Like, stop lying.
Yeah.
Like really just stop lying. And two, just start to notice your own behavior. The hardest habit to change is who you are. Like that's just the reality of it, right? So can you notice your behavior? And I don't mean this, like people talk about this and it drives me nuts. And they're like, just bring awareness to your life. And I'm like, yeah, and then do something about it. So why don't we start there? Because action is the cure all. And I know that this is an intense approach, and people will often come to me and they'll be like, you're too intense. I can't work with you. I'm like, great, go find somebody less intense. I'm an intense person. I came from intensity. You want to change your life? We're going to need to change it intensely. Right. And so I think just honesty and massive action. But here, and I got to say this because this is important, fear will keep people trapped. And so people will stand here and they'll hear this and they will consume content like this and they will get the book or join the program or like whatever it is that people do, and they won't take the steps required because they're scared.
Mhm.
Well, the universe doesn't support scared. And so if you're unwilling to walk the path, and this is one of the greatest things I get to do as a coach, like I look at this journey as we're walking down this tunnel and there's a light down there. The only difference between me and you is I've walked down this tunnel multiple times with other people and I've held their hand through that path. And it's a lot easier to do that with someone than by yourself. And so, like having the support, I'll add a third one because I do think it's massively important. Having a support system around you to walk this path is super important because you're stupid if you think that what you have done that has brought you to here will be the same things that will take you to where you want to go. And that's a lie that people tell themselves. I told myself that lie, and that's why my life was a disaster.
Yeah, yeah. So my next question I was going to ask is going to be related to that support system. What if the people listening to the show are the support system and not the person who necessarily needs the help? Is there anything that they can do to help guide that person and or just make them feel supported more, I guess?
Yeah, just make them feel supported. I mean, like that's what it is. Like, and you need to talk to them and find out what they need. Like the worst thing that you can do for some, and this is my opinion, the worst thing that somebody could do when I was in the throes of this early on would be trying to help me. I'm like, I don't need I need to figure this out. I don't need your guidance, right? I just need somebody to sit there and on the hard days, just be in my presence with me, right? Just energetically show up, right? And I think we live in a weird society where everybody's trying to help each other all the time. Like if you go ask my friends group, there's no coaching outside of my office hours. I am watching fucking UFC fights and training and going and shooting guns with my friends and concerts and living life. I'm not trying to help them, and they're all going through shit. It's crazy. I mean, like my circle of friends are all going through their own things,
Yeah.
and I think it's really important to bring notice to that and not try to help people who didn't ask for your help. Can you just be there? Because that's what most people just need. They just
Yeah.
need someone there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think that's a really, really good point to make. I was in a car accident last year and had a brain injury. And my husband learned probably the hard way that what he just needed to do was just be there because there wasn't anything that he could
Mm-hmm.
do to make things better.
Totally.
Different kind of trauma, different kind of experience, but just that was exactly what I needed at that moment. So
Mm-hmm.
just being there, perfect. Do you have any upcoming events or anything you wanted to share with the listeners? I know you got the coaching programs. Uh, what else?
I mean, we're always doing stuff, but the best thing to do is just check out our podcast. You got to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com. And then I'm on social everywhere at Michael Unbroken, but we're always doing stuff. We're always launching new programs, new courses, new books, new things. So, because there's always more information. I'm always learning more. So I'm always teaching more. So,
Yeah, yep. Lifelong learning, right? Can't stop, otherwise you're stagnant.
yep.
Very cool.
Yep. Totally.
Any last words you want to share before we close out today?
No, I think that this journey, like you just need to decide what you want. Most people aren't going to do this work. I'm telling you right now, I've been coaching for almost a decade. I've worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Millions and millions of people have listened to that podcast, sold more books than I can count, blah, 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 blah. Are you going to be the 1%?
Yeah.
Most people aren't going to do this. Most people aren't going to show up and they're going to be on their deathbed and they're going to be like, man, that life sure did suck. And I'm like, yep. And guess whose fault it was? And that's one of the really hard truths about it because people will want to be the victim. And again, I'm not taking that away from you. But if you continue to be the victim, well, you play victim games, you get victim prizes. And what's really difficult about this journey is nobody's coming to save your ass. Nobody's coming. Nobody cares either. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you. I'm not trying to be an asshole when I say that. Nobody cares. They got their own shit. Nobody cares that you're in your kitchen crying or in bed on a Saturday eating chocolate cake, getting high, watching the CrossFit games while your family doesn't talk to you and you're 50 grand in debt. Nobody gives a fuck. You have to give a fuck. You have to do the work. You have to show up. And it's not that your people won't support you. That's not what I'm saying, because my people are incredibly supportive. I have a fucking awesome community. Even at the beginning of the chaos of this, I still had some people who were like, hey, we got your back, right? And I think that's important to note. But ultimately, make a decision or shut up.
Mm-hmm. As we talked about, I think before we hit record, the brutal honesty is sometimes what people really need. So
Yeah.
so it can be refreshing. Thank you so much for being here today, Michael.
Thanks, my friend.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.